we are JSLovers, a non-profit organization responsible, you can say, for conducting a lot of seminars, workshops. So nowadays, because of the pandemic, we are doing everything online instead of going offline at different locations. So we are on different locations right now: New Delhi, Mumbai, Pune, Bangalore, and Jaipur. This was before pandemic, but we're doing all our meetups online right now, and hope to see you again uh, all on one place after everything gets to normal. So these are our handles. You can go and check it out. And we do post all our meetups on meetup.com. You will get further information of the upcoming events on meetup.com and on the Twitter page as well. We do share and post. So let's move forward. So these are the people behind JSLovers. Neha and Jasmine being the primary, and Pratik, me, Vaibhav, and Sakshi being the co-organizers, or you can say volunteers as per se. And we do help them to organize everything around. So the code of conduct very important for everyone. We need to be polite with every you can say technology, what we speak, what we say to anyone, even in the chat channel. So do keep in mind that we do not respect anyone, even the technology we are learning or things we know already. So just keep in mind. And do note that this is a recorded video and it's being telecasted live on YouTube. So do not speak anything which is proprietary in terms of your projects or companies as per se. So let's move to the topic of today, that is GoLang. And we thank Weber for coming in and letting us know about GoLang. So it's more of a beginner session. All the prerequisites and the setup related instructions were written on the meetup page. So I hope that you have all checked it out and did the necessary part of it. So let's hand it over to Weber. Weber, you there?
Hi guys, I'm here.
Sure. So I'll just unshare my. So I'll just stop presenting. You can go and take the stage.
Sure, Ekaz. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for a great introduction. So I will present my screen. Just let me know, guys, when you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, it's visible.
All right. So what we will actually cover today, like Ekaz mentioned, that we'll just touch the tip of the iceberg, which is GoLang. So GoLang is pretty much the buzzword these days. What is GoLang? Where did it come from? We will talk about that. Why or why not is it important to learn? So we will talk about certain reasons around that, and we will see if we can, or at least from my perspective, I can get you interested in learning GoLang and give a different perspective to the world of technology and application development. Right. So quickly, I will start with my introduction first. So I'm
Weber,
Vaibhav
just a
Vashist.
sec. Just a sec. Just
Yeah.
want to know, get to know all the people that you can post your questions here in the chat room of uh, online meetup. So you can just the people who are attending us live on the YouTube, you can post your links on the Discord server of JS Lovers, and the people in the chat room can just post their messages on the chat itself. So we'll disturb Vaibhav in between to answer all your questions. Just post them anywhere possible, either on the Discord server, on the chat room, wherever you're available. So Vaibhav, you can start now.
Sure. That will be really nice. That is going to be a good interactive session. Right. So before we jump into GoLang, I will just start with my quick introduction. I thought it did not deserve a slide particularly, so I will just talk about it. So I'm Weber Vashist. I have more than 13 years of application software development lifecycle experience. In these 13 years, I have basically looked at multiple languages, multiple ways of developing software, multiple technologies, and I gained experience over the years to look at different technologies from a lens of how they will help me move forward in my career and how they will ease application development. I consider myself a technologist, so I try and experimenting with newer technologies. So today I'm interested in GoLang. I am also working on certain AI ML and data science projects. So that is what keeps me interested. I also am a foodie, so I like going out, trying new things. But nowadays it has become a problem, right? So I don't go out much. So technology is the only respite nowadays. All right. So we will move ahead with the topic of the day, which is Golang. And the title that I've basically chosen today, is it the future or is it my future? Right. So JS Lovers is a community where a lot of JavaScript related things happen, but still people are looking at Golang. People want to look at different career options. People want to look at if it is a viable option to learn and if you should actually spend time at all in learning a new language altogether, or you should just hone something that you already have, build on the skills that you already have. Okay. So what is really Golang? So what this slide talks about is what we have heard about Golang, right? We will come to a state where we understand what Golang is and why is it useful, why is it used, but what is it that we have heard about Golang? So mostly what people have heard about Golang is that it is an open source programming language, right? What does open source programming language mean? That it is a programming language that you can actually download the code for and adapt to your needs, right? This is what we have heard. And because it is open source, backed up by Google, everybody wants to do something with it, right? Then it is statically typed. Okay. So, Akas, would you be able to help me get an answer to this question? So, I just want to interact with the audience or people who are there in either the chat window or who are watching us live. Uh, can somebody tell me or give me an example of a statically typed language, or just simply what is a statically typed language? Anybody? Just put it on chat, on Discord, anywhere.
Okay, let me
We'll
check.
move. Yeah, sure. We'll move ahead. And once we have the answer, we'll come back to this. Okay.
Sure.
This language is also compiled directly into machine language. Okay. So there is so on multiple languages, for example, older languages like Java. So these languages needed a binary code to be translated from what you wrote. So you wrote a program in certain syntax of the language, they converted it into bytecode, and then they would get to the machine. On that machine, you would need a virtual machine to run that bytecode, right? So your bytecode had to be understood by a virtual machine, like a JVM in Java, okay, and then executed on the machine, right? But this language just directly compiles into machine language, moves directly into machine language, and then just gets executed, which is really fast. So this is what we have all heard, right? So we will look at certain positives, negatives, we'll debunk certain myths as well during the course of the presentation. And another question that I have is, uh, can you just also name one dynamically typed language? We are all surrounded by the great organizers of JS Lovers, and the language is core to this community, and that is dynamically typed. If somebody can name that language, right? So we'll come back to these questions. I'll just move ahead with the presentation. Now, where did Golang actually come from, right? So suddenly we were talking about a lot of languages, right? Around 2 to 3 years, even 4 years back, there were languages like Java, there was Python, JavaScript, a lot of other languages, PHP, Perl, and a lot of other things. But Golang was nowhere there, right? Nobody knew what Golang was. What was Go? Why did it exist? Where did it suddenly come from? And in the advent of 2005 or 2016, it just became so popular that everything wanted to, every company, every developer wanted to know more about Go. Every server program wanted to include Go in their execution. But where did it really come from, right? So Google, as we all know, the greatest company and one of the companies that we all probably aspire to work for at one point in time, the engineers at Google had certain problems in their coding environments, right? So they thought that the programs that they were writing were slow, the execution was slow, and primarily they were taking a lot of time to deploy their code, right? So they just thought, because of them being Googlers, so they just thought that why should we not write a language, why do we not reinvent the wheel and say, let us try and make something that makes it quick for us to write code, to develop softwares, to develop applications, and to deploy it to production. So in 2007, and this is directly from a Google blog, there is also a very interesting YouTube video. I will share the link to that as well, where Google talks about how it was conceived and where did it come into existence from. So in 2007, they conceived the concept of this language. They released it in 2009, and then suddenly it was actually very dormant, but suddenly it just became very popular, right? Why did it actually become popular? So the days when Java, Python, and all these years of 2007 and 2009, we already had very big names conducting programming languages, or they were supporting programming languages, right? For example, Java was backed at that time by Sun, Microsystems, and then Oracle. It was a great backend language, right? So these were very big players already in the market, like Java and Python, and there was not space enough for a new language. So it actually was dormant, but it suddenly became big because of certain reasons, which we will now talk about. Right? So, what was the real motivation to devise it? So the real motivation behind, like we talked about, that Google engineers thought of certain problems or thought of they had a vision. So they had a vision to create a language which was lightweight in nature. And being lightweight, all that we mean is that when the language is executed on your machine, the footprint is really small, right? It is pleasant to code. Now, this is very subjective. Okay, it's interesting, but it is very subjective that in terms of how Google engineers thought, they thought C was very pleasant to code. Okay. Now, interestingly, it is a very subjective opinion. So for me, C is like nice. Somebody may not like it. But in the advent of this language and invention of this language, a lot of people thought C was the best language at that point in time, or they loved it. So they thought that we'll make a language which is similar to C, and hence for them it was very pleasant to code and write an application, right? They also wanted to make something which will make their work more productive. We have all worked in organizations, or we all aspire to work in IT industry. The first thing that comes up for us as senior professionals, or mid senior professionals, or even people who just join the company as freshers, that how productive could you be? What is the amount of code, or what is the amount of output that you can produce on daily basis, right? So that was also the question, that how do we, if I work for 2 hours, what is the amount of value that I can deliver in these 2 hours? So I wanted to make it more productive, right? So after combining everything of all this, what Google thought, based on the needs at that point in time, right? Because there was the hardware was not that great at that point in time. The processors were still taking shape, right? There were multi-core processors, but they were still taking shape. The processing power was not at its best at that point in time. So they had processing power. The processors were like 3 gigahertz, 4 gigahertz, but there were not a lot of cores and multi-core CPUs at that point in time. So based on that, they invented something, and what it really came out to be. Okay, so this is how Google explains it, right? So this is what we had heard about Go, but this is what really Go is, right? So it is a compiled, a concurrent, garbage collected, statically typed language developed at Google. So Google is very proud of it. We will come to the problems that Go has as well, but currently Google is very proud, and a lot of companies, the big companies like Netflix has adopted it, Uber has adopted it, Google works on it a lot. So hence they are very proud of it, right? So Go is efficient, scalable, and productive. So how is it efficient? There is one word that is completely to the core of this language: efficiency and concurrency, right? So they want to make everything as quick as possible. It has certain drawbacks, it has certain problems, and it poses certain constraints. But the language, what it does it very quickly. It is scalable, so you can just scale multiple, so you can just scale exponentially, not even additionally. You can just completely scale exponentially, and we will look at it how and why, right? And productive, of course, in the amount of time that you're given, you can write more code, you can deliver more value, than the legacy languages that were like they still are, but I still call them legacy languages, like Java and Python. So you are more productive with Go than a Java or a Python program. According to Google engineers, like we thought about, because the opinion is subjective, it is pleasant and fun, but subjectively with other programmers in the industry, it is unimaginative and boring, right? Because it actually adopts a lot of syntax and semantics from C. So people say that they were not creative enough. So they were very unimaginative. And hence people say that I can write C and it is very boring to write C. So it will be as boring to write Go language programs as well. So that is the basic understanding of what Go or GoLang is. Yeah, Ekas, did you get the answer to those questions by any chance?
No, not yet.
All right, no problems. We'll move ahead. So I'll just give the answer to those questions. That Go is a statically typed language. What is statically typed is? Statically typed is that you look at the type of variables, type conversions of those variables at the compile time, right? And what a dynamically typed language does is that it does not worry about what you are writing at this moment. Once you run your program, you'll be given a test, or it basically tests for any type conversions of the type of the variables that you have tried to typecast from one variable to the other at the runtime. So like I said, and I gave a good clue as well in the question, that JS Lovers is based on JavaScript, that is core to them, right? So JavaScript is actually a dynamically typed language. Everything in JavaScript pretty much happens at the runtime when you run it in the browser. So that is when it all tests it, looks at it, and basically does the magic, right? So JavaScript is one of the very popular dynamically typed languages, while Go is a statically typed language, right? So what does Go really do? Right, so Go became popular because of the familiarity to its old syntax, right? Because it borrowed a lot of standard semantics and syntax from C, so it was very familiar for Z developers to code. It works at scale. So works at scale means that concurrency is core to the heart of this language, right? So when we say concurrency, what does concurrency mean? Concurrency does not mean parallelism. Okay, concurrency means, or in layman terms, concurrency simply means how efficiently you can actually use the amount of cores or processors that are there available to you, right? So the beauty of Go is actually at its heart, which is concurrency, and how simple it is. So it is very simple to write, it is very simple to execute, it is very quick. So the easier approach towards scaling the amount of threads that you can execute on the processor that is given to you is the scalability of a program. And the scalability is basically the heart of this language. Okay, so what is the advantage of? So I am just wanting to cover just the theoretical part of Go, basically, and we'll see how we go forward. So, what is the advantage? What is the boon? So, when Golang actually came and there were a lot of organizations that adopted the language, why did they really adopt the language, right? Because it was completely minimalist. So, it is so minimal that the complete language specification is pretty much just 50 pages online. So if you go through the Go language spec, it is only 50 pages. In 50 pages, the whole language is covered. Anything related to its variables, anything related to structure definitions, anything related to input, output, arrays, anything at all. Right. So this is how minimal this language is. It is open source. Now the beauty of the language being open source, it is so open source that even Google, who developed this, actually uses the public repository of Go in their products. Right. So this is the extent of how open source this language is. Right. It is transparent. So transparent means, now this is actually a juxtaposed view of how you basically write and type in a language. In Java, you basically had inheritance, right? Go language does not support inheritance or auto typecasting. So there is nothing hidden, right? It is a problem as well, But the beauty of this language is that it is so transparent that even if you wanted to delete a number from an array, you will have to write the complete code that there is an array. You will have to write the array. You will have to add the numbers to that array. You will have to make sure that the position of that array where you wanted to delete the number is coded inside the code, and then you delete it. In Python, for example, the basic syntax that you had to write was del, so delete the name of the array, which is for example a, and the index of the array element. So del a in the square bracket, just write 5, and you will delete the fifth element. It is very simple, but you just don't understand what is happening, right? So, but you will in Go, you will have to write that code. Now it is compatible. So the another beauty of this language, so I just call this language so beautiful because it has impressed me so much that how minimal is this language is, and still it is able to do amazing amount of things, right? So you would have realized that on the languages like Java, if you have worked on it, there are different specifications that come up over the years and different versions of these languages. Now, Go, as Google developers developed Go, they have actually guaranteed backward compatibility. There is actually a page on the Go language formal documentation where they actually guarantee backward compatibility of all minor and major versions of Go language 1. So when you start with major version 1, anything that comes after it in GoLang 1 or Go 1, as they popularly call it, is backward compatible. They also mention that it is backward compatible only to the major version 1, because when GoLang 2 comes up, there may be certain changes because they have not envisioned GoLang 2 yet. So that's the beauty of it. And performance, so of course you will see this everywhere. Even when you search GoLang today on Google, the first thing that you will see is concurrency, right? So this is the heart of the language. It is so amazing that we'll just look at the basics of Golang first, and we'll see if we get time, or if we are able to cover concurrency as well, though I'm a little against covering concurrency in programmatical concepts because it is very confusing, but we will cover the basics for sure. Okay, so what are the disadvantages, right? So we discussed about the boons. Now, what are the banes of this language, right? So, of course, if everything cannot be all rosy, right? Everything cannot be all just a great garden with great flowers, smelling really great. There will have to be certain problems in the language as well. Because it is very simple, there are certain problems with it. So it doesn't do a lot of things. It only does some things, very limited amount of things, but it does it really well. So for example, Golang does concurrency. It does concurrency really well, right? It takes motivation from C, but it takes motivation from C really well, right? It is a very young language. So it was started in 2009. It was released in 2009. It is only 10 years, and because it was not adopted and because it was dormant, a lot of development did not happen on this language. But of late, I think since the past 2 years, if you look at the actual GitHub repository of Golang, you will see a lot of commits happening and there is a lot of maintenance that is going on. But it is still very young, so it has not it is not thought through yet completely for multiple use cases, and the use cases that it does not support, we'll talk about it. It is very opinionated, right? So there are certain languages that are opinionated, but it is very, very strictly opinionated. It says that you have to do something like this, so you will have to do it like that, right? It says that you will have to type this, so a variable has to be of this type, and you have to make sure that you write the type of that variable. You will always have to do that. There is no excuse. It will. Secondly, there is no inheritance, so there is no classes. The language is object oriented, but it does not support classes. So fundamentally, Golang is object oriented, but it does not support classes. It does not support inheritance in any way or form. And it does not support auto type conversion. So everything that you will have to do, you will have to hand code it. Now it is too simple, right? So now it is both an advantage and a disadvantage. Because of the language being too simple, you just do not know how to work around complicated use cases. So you only work on simpler use cases, or you have to apply your head around those simple use cases and then work around them to make them complicated, right? Now it is not ready for business. At least this is my opinion. Maybe the companies that are using it, like Netflix and Uber and other companies, they have different use cases for GoLang. But at least from my perspective, it is not ready for business. By that, I mean that it is not ready for business driven use cases, right? So it is not ready because it cannot do a lot of data understanding, right? There are data structures that you can implement, but it does not understand context behind the data. So it cannot manipulate data. In business related applications, there is a lot of data that we work with. So the language does not support it yet. In the next specifications, of course, there will be more introductions in this language, but currently, according to me, strictly, in my honest opinion, it is not ready for business driven use cases. Okay, how does it compare against what we know? So I will just take a pause. Because would you help me if there are any questions that we can talk about, anything, or we can go ahead?
No, you can go ahead. I guess
All right,
your presentation is quite clear.
all
So
right, great.
we don't have any questions. If there will be any, I'll definitely
Sure,
disturb in between.
sure. Because thank you so much. So how does it compare against what we currently know, right? So we know Java, we know Python, and now we want to know Go, right? So at least from my understanding, Java and Python are a good comparison with Go, because the biggest limitation that we will talk about later as well is that Go does not have inbuilt libraries or inherent packages or other things to support web application development, a web UI development, right? So JavaScript, HTML, CSS, other aspects are very centric to the front end, but Go as a language was brought in place not to replace, but to enhance the backend, right? So the correct languages that are in good comparison with Go are Java and Python. So in Java, dependencies are definitely better managed, right? So this slide talks about different features of each language, just providing a basic comparison. And if you want to do Go or not. So dependencies are better managed in Java. Program would exit only once all non-daemon threads finish. So people who are acquainted with threads, multi-threading, parallel processing, right? So in Java, you would know a program will only exit if all, even daemon and non-daemon. So there is a thread that runs the execution of the Java program, and it spawns certain threads which are non-daemon, right? I'm not getting into that concept, but just saying the program will exit only if all non-daemon threads finish, right? Even Java, there was a very sudden change in the architecture and how the language was written, right? Now in Java, there was a version till Java 8, and suddenly came version Java 9, where they started talking about modular architecture. While the code was still compatible, there were architectural changes and they were sudden. More importantly, the direction of Java that is being proposed by Oracle, which was free till now, may actually start costing an amount for enterprise support, enterprise level implementations. So that is one thing that has changed in Java. Now, Python, like I gave the example of deleting an element or deleting an element from a slice of an array, right? So Python is readable. So it is very much readable. You write what you want to do and you do what you like, right? So that's the fundamental of Python. But there were also certain abrupt changes in the packages for Python 2 and Python 3. Even today, when you look at Python, all the Python programmers or people who know Python will recommend you to use Python 3, but still there are certain libraries that are not supported in Python 3, and for that you have to go back to Python 2. So that was also changed. Now comes Go, right? So there is, like I said, there is a guaranteed compatibility page that is available on Google's formal Go language specification documentation. So you can look at that. It is very strongly typed. So it is very, so this is, so the core to the language, if you want to understand, is strong typed, simple, and concurrent. So if you want to take anything back from this session around GoLang, you just take back these three words: that Go is simple, very simple. Trust me on that. Then Go is concurrent. So that is the biggest use case that we work around Go. That is the beauty of Go. And then Go is very strongly typed. So there are no auto conversions, nothing you have to write what you want. Build speeds are really fast. So there was an example that I was going through. I was trying to build an open source project. Now that project itself had like hundreds of files, but I could build the project in seconds. Try and do it with Java, it just takes amazing amount of it just takes minutes and at times 10 12 minutes just to build a project, right? And if you have test cases in that project, it takes 10 more minutes to do it, and this works in seconds. So I will give you that example as well. Now there is an inherent testing and marking tools. Now when Google developers thought about inventing this language, they said that if I am writing a program, can I actually test it as well, right? So that is one of the most beautiful aspects of this language, that you don't have to import libraries or plugins. There is a testing mechanism that is inbuilt to the language. So we will talk about that in our hands as
Before proceeding,
well.
I
Yeah,
would give you some questions.
yeah,
One
sure.
question has come up from Anu. He says, "Do you have any business use case which you can talk about in short?"
Yes, there are business use cases. So for example, there is so we will talk about, so there is a slide where we talk about what are the business use cases going forward, and where Go works best.
Okay. The next question comes up from Neha. Are there any use cases for migration to Go?
So there are actually no, I wouldn't say no. There are not great use cases for migration to Go. That's the sad part. So if you are trying to write something new at the server side, for example, you want to write a service, right, that has to be really fast and responsive and has to work in parallel to take care of multiple inputs and provide you outputs as quickly as possible, and it also has to operate at the machine level. So we need to understand that all of this, because it executes at the machine level, that is the reason it is fast. So if not faster than C, it is as fast as C, right? But the beauty or the non-beauty of this language is that you will not find real life use cases to migrate something that is already written in a business phase to C, right? And that is the similar case, right? So Google just invented this to work around their problems, to solve their problems. They did not write it to migrate something that was already there, right? So that is why it is very simple. That is why it is very small. That's why it is very limited in its nature, because not think the rest of the world through. That is why it is said that the language is unimaginative, right? And that is why it is very small. The specification is very small because it is very limited. But I would recommend always GoLang to be used in cases where you are developing something from scratch. There are no good use cases for migration, and it is also not completely recommended because it will take more time migrating than actually writing the implementation.
I Webhub Neha this side. So
Yeah, hi Neha.
Webhub, yeah. So what you are saying is, just correct me if I'm wrong. What I am getting is,
Yeah.
as the last sentence you said, think about the creating a new application in Go rather than thinking about the migration. And second
Yes,
thing you
yes.
said, yeah, second thing you said that because it's a kind of a uh, replacement of C, and so there are not much migration case studies. But now my question is coming. So like I work in the organization where we are working on the like e-commerce application.
Yeah.
So Go would not be a preferred language for that.
Okay, so in e-commerce applications, there are multiple layers. So firstly, I would just want to correct you, at least correct myself to make sure that the understanding is right. It is not a replacement of C at all. Okay, so it is just motivated from C, and for certain use cases, they said, okay, we'll make it simpler than C. We'll try and make the coding as fun. We'll limit it to a particular use case. We'll make it concurrent. Okay, that's it. The second thing in e-commerce specifically, there are multiple layers to an e-commerce application. Right? So there is front end and then there is the back end. So on the back end, there are multiple services that you do, right? So for example, you wanted to look at orders, right? So suppose in a holiday season, there are multiple orders that come your way and you want to execute them in parallel, concurrently. What Go gives you as an advantage, so that is one of the use cases that is very nice, that you can actually write a service, you can spawn a web server on Go, you can write a service in Go, which is inherently concurrent, right? So the process can actually be that you take the data from the user and you put it into the database. So the process to write your data into the database can be executed concurrently, and that would be very quick because the execution happens at the machine level. That is where all this actually comes together. So one of those use cases that I can think of.
Okay.
But in business relevant data, right? So when data comes into the picture, when you say I want to understand user data, when there is context, so that is where this language is not helpful, and hence a lot of migration use cases are not in picture right now in real life.
Okay, Vaibhav, thank you.
No problem. I hope I was able to answer the question.
Yep. Let's
Right.
move forward.
We'll move ahead. So why should you actually care, right? So we talked about GoLang and the world is talking about GoLang a lot. So why should we all care, right? Because firstly, there is a shining exterior, right? So Google made it popular by saying that you can write your backend services in Go, but you also need to understand what services do you want to write. You want to write services that are context agnostic, business context agnostic, which can perform, talk to your processor, use the complete power of your cores and your machine, right? Make the process as quick, as concurrent as possible. But the underlying engine is also very finely tuned. So it is not just the language that is easy to code. Once you code it, you will see that it is an amazing engine that is underlying all this exterior. Now there are no external libraries, but a single unit, right? So when you create a Go package that needs to be executed, there is just one single unit. So we'll see all of your code. For example, anybody who has worked in Microsoft libraries, there are DLLs, dependencies that are created. But the beauty is that there are no, in Java, there are no dependency jars. So you don't include jars. There is nothing. There is just one executable package that is created. Just start using it, and that is all that Go has. So of course, huge improvement in terms of performance as compared to interpreted languages. So languages that are interpreted take an amazing amount of time to even understand what I need to do. So you have to interpret the code, make the language understand, make the runtime understand, but there is nothing like that. You just convert it to a machine level code and all gets executed magically. Now Go implements its own garbage collection actually much better than Java, but it is pretty much similar to C. So it is similar, not better than C, but similar to C. And build speeds are amazing. So they're lightning fast actually. Right. So these are certain additional things that I wanted to cover. So GoLang as a language also has threads implemented. I wouldn't call them threads. They're still concurrent execution mechanisms, right? They are called Go routines. Now, these are lightweight threads. These are not complete threads. So I'll give you a comparison that in Java, when you spawn a thread in a multi-threaded program, a thread would cost you around 1 MB of space in your heap, right? But in Go, it is actually only about 2 KB. So when you compare the amount of threads that you can actually spawn, even while it is limited to the processor that is given to you, it is a huge amount of difference, right? So in the space that one thread in Java consumes, you can actually have more than around 500 threads, right? So that is how concurrent this language becomes. Now, also the way Golang manages threads is that it is not based on the operating system. So you take away the power of the operating system from for thread management, and Golang does it by itself. So the language actually provides the implementation of thread management. While there is no virtual machine that is needed, you still need runtime. Okay, so for example, like JRE, right? So there's a runtime that is needed. Go also needs a runtime, and the Go runtime provides the implementation of managing the threads, and Go manages its own threads, so it doesn't go operating system to manage that. Move ahead. Yeah. So when is it actually needed, right? If at all you think it is needed, right? So you can talk about it in terms of systems applications, right? There's DevOps, so systems application as in where your system integrations become important. So you have a third-party system, you want to just keep fetching data at the lightning fast speed, please use Go. You want to keep data into the database, please use Go. You want backend services to just interact with two services, consolidate, go ahead and use Go, right? There is DevOps and tooling. So if you want to do automation of your pipelines, because they are very specific to machine level implementations, so please go ahead and use Go. There's real-time web, real-time applications, because this is always available concurrent and at the machine level. One of the biggest advantages that this you can have real-time apps created on Go, while there is no inherent mechanism to code a web UI, right? But there are libraries that are coming up. So because it is open source, people actually spawn their own version of GoLang. They create their extensions, they put it for Go. So there is a utility called Go Get. So you can get packages for GoLang there. Okay. And then concurrency, of course. So every time you need anything concurrent, anything blazing fast, you can go ahead and use Go. So when should I not use it? So this is at least from my perspective, from what I have seen, from what I've read, from what I've used, I would not recommend using Go in domain-driven applications. So microservices are usually, at least the interface, at least the services that you interface with, are very domain-driven. They're based on events. They're based on contexts. So I would not recommend creating domain-driven microservices on Go. People are still doing that. It is a different thought. So just want to bring that point as well, that people still do that, but in my opinion, shouldn't. Then front ends, because there is no native support for UI. For example, Java had Java FX. Go does not have native support for UI development. There is a new specification that people want to bring in from a Go perspective, but currently there is nothing. So for front ends, do not use Go. Firmware and US based. So OS and firmware are basically your kernels, right? Do not use Go because C is already. That's why I specifically mentioned that it is not a replacement of C, because C does that really well. And there in this language, they made it so limited and so simple that the routines just don't take the complexity into account. So that has not been thought through. Right? So it was just specific to certain problems that they wanted to solve, and they wrote Go. That's it. And SOAP and XML, of course, because this SOAP and XML has context. So don't use Go there. Just try and use Go for as simple data structures as possible. If you want to use, so there are pointer support inherent to the language. If you guys want to use pointers, please go ahead with Go. But anytime you want to process XML, do not do that, because that is an enterprise level solution. So don't do that. For a machine level solution, please do. I hope I was able to answer the question that we had there and shed some more light on Neha's questions. Right, so how to go basically. So we are done with theory part. So I will just share my IDE quickly. Okay.
Well, I just have a personal question. You
Yeah,
mentioned
sure.
that if it's data-driven program or front-end or microservices related, don't use Go. But if it's assembly-based or low-level language-based code, then use Go, right?
So not low assembly, but machine. So
Machine
machine
level.
means that you are actually wanting to make the most use of your processing power, right?
I get it.
So anything that you can write in machine language, you can actually translate it into a higher level language, which could be C or C++ or GoLang, right? So that is one thing. Also, you can use it for data, but not for contextual data. For example, in microservices are designed in a domain driven fashion, right? So for example, in an e-commerce system, like Neha said, there will be microservices like order, shipping, payment, right? So these are all very contextual. But at the underlying concept of it, if you just have to consume some data that you are not worried about what this data is about, you can keep using Go. But till the point it starts becoming domain, Go just does not understand it. It's object oriented. Give you example, right? Why should you not do it? Because Go does not support inheritance, right? So for example, you wanted to have an order. In that order, you wanted to have an order ID, right? Related to that order ID, you may want to have a payment, and then based if your order is complete, you may want to ship your product, right? So this all inherits a behavior, right? But Go does not support inheritance out of the box, right? So you will try and write something that is not supported by the language. Instead of that, just Java, because the fundamentals align with it, right? Java or anything which is completely object oriented, maybe behavioral or functional, right? But this is not a functional programming. This is just to solve certain basic problems where your machine becomes central to your execution, right?
Processing intensive.
Right.
Right.
Processing intensive anything.
Right.
That is where Google also uses it a lot. So Google uses it. I know a practical example. Grofers uses it. So they use it for their delivery management systems, which are very processing intensive.
Right. Preferably on the website, even I can see a lot of companies and case
Exactly.
studies like
Exactly.
American Express, Capital One,
Exactly.
Outfare.
Yeah.
Right. So
Correct.
many
Yeah.
of them has used it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So a lot of companies that used C and they found it complicated, they started using Go just to reduce the complexity in their use cases. Just quickly share my ID. So I've just created some sort of hello world programs to get everybody acquainted. I will just have to confirm if everybody has prerequisites or GoLang installed, and if everyone. So just to validate that GoLang is installed on your system, there are two things that you have to do. So there are two paths that GoLang creates when you install it. So one variable, environment variable, is called a Go path. The other is called Go bin. Okay, so I will just talk about the basic steps. So once you install Go, you need to open your command prompt. Just run this command. Okay, just to validate if your installation is fine enough. So you do a Go version, and you will see the version of the Go language that is installed for you. Once this is validated, it just says that your Go path is set, or your bin folder of your Go is available in the path. So you are pretty much sorted. Now
There's a bit disturbance in your voice.
okay, is it better now?
No.
Just a moment.
It's coming very far from mic, I believe.
Just a moment. Let me just validate. Is it better now? I just changed my mic.
Yeah, better.
Okay. All right. So I will just share my screen again. Okay. Okay, so the basic steps are that once you've installed Go, just go to the command prompt and write this command and check. If this command works, it gives you a version or not. So the command is very simple. So this is Go version. It will just show you what version of Go you have installed in your system. Very nice. And keep making spelling mistakes. Right, so this is the version of Go that is available on my system. Okay. Now, just to check, also just make sure that these two paths are set in your environment variables. So Go does it by itself, so you don't have to do it, but it's always good to validate. So what does Go path mean? Go path is where your Go language distribution is installed, and Go bin. So like I said, in GoLang, when you start compiling and building your code, there is only one executable that you get at the end of the day. There are no dependencies, nothing. So for Windows, so it is platform dependent, right? So for Windows, you will get an exe. So the exe path where you want to keep the exe is basically told by the GoBin folder. Okay, this is the path where your exe is copied or generated. Okay, so just validate you have these environment variables. If not, you can just simply, while you should, but go path definitely be there. GoBin may not be. You can just quickly create it, point it to any directory that you want, and you're pretty much sorted. Okay, now code structure. We need to talk about the code structure of GoLang, right? So GoLang is basically, so you must have heard that C has certain packages and you can import, right? So the basic code structure, because it is borrowed from C, still remains the same, but it works on modules. Okay, so a module in GoLang is simply an application because it is going to turn into an exe. So any application, any service, any microservice, any operation that you want to create as an executable is a module. Okay, so how do we create a module? It's a very simple command, but we'll talk about the commands, but just understand what is a module. Inside modules, you have packages, and then inside the packages, you can have source files. So like I said, my module is my first example. Okay, this is just an introduction to Go language. This is my module. Inside module, I have a package. Inside this package, I have a Go file. You can also structure it in names of packages. You can have an SRC folder here as well. But because this is just a beginner level class, we'll just talk about files, packages, and modules. We'll not talk about SRC, test, and other fundamentals. We can have a different session. Okay, now you just have to, so to start with Go, just a very basic fundamental, that you just have to create one directory where you want to keep your code. That's how simple it is. So I created a directory called my first example, right? I had my Go bin set to Go and bin folder. So you will see an exe file here because I built it already. You just have to create a file. So we will just create a directory again. So inside Go, I will create another directory, second example. Okay, inside this directory, I will create a file which is second hello world. Okay, so because Visual Studio Code understands the kind of languages that you're writing, so it will show you this Go icon that is a Go file. So what you can actually do is just make sure that there is a package for the file. Because this is a package, I can use second hello world.go package in this folder, right? So this will be my package, for example, right? Now, exactly as C, I can just import a package again. So you will see the alerts. Visual Studio Code just keeps telling me there is a Go code plugin that I want to install. I don't want to install it. So I can just import a format package. So this is the standard syntax of importing packages. We'll talk about it in the example. How do you import more classes, or it does not have classes, but more functions from different packages that you're trying to create. And then you basically just have a function. You can just write just wanting to show print statement, right? So this is a function, and all that you can do is you just type string and just showcase, right? You can just say this is hello world again, right? So this is my Go file. Okay, this is the structure of my Go file. So I define a package. Okay, I import if I need anything. If I don't need anything, I will not import it. And then a function. So this is all that is there to a Go file. This is the basic structure. Going forward with more complicated concepts, we'll have more functions, we'll have nested functions and all that, and routines. But this is the basic fundamental structure of a Go file. Okay.
I think the syntax error. It's print ln.
Okay. Thank you. So I will save it. I will go here and I will say my second example. Okay, I will clear this. And the command that I want to basically have, so it has now started showing me an error. Okay. Right, so what is the error? So I will just quickly show you what is the error. Okay. So can somebody tell me what is the error? If anybody knows C or if anybody has tried his hands on that. Okay, anyways, we'll look at the error. Okay, but I mean, even JavaScript people would know what is the error here. But
Semicolon.
let me just see. Okay, so in C, and because it is borrowed from C, we don't use semicolons.
Yeah, it's just that the brackets, round brackets are missing.
Awesome. I always have this intentionally not there. I'm really happy. So anyways, I'll put it here. Okay. So now in the second example, all that you have to do, now there are very simple commands, okay? So first you have to build your code. Anywhere you have to just build it, okay? So the command that you need to write is go build. Now let's see if it builds or not. Right. Now you can, because we have decided some location that is available to us for go bin, I can create an exe of this program, right? To turn it into an executable or an executable file. Okay. So I will just, now the command to do that is go install. And if I just wanted to directly run the program, what will I really do? I will just say go run my second example. Right. So you see this problem here that it is saying go run cannot run on main packet, right? So for any executable that you want to create as an executable or you want to run it, the package that you want to run it in is basically a main package and it should have a main function. So that is exactly borrowed from C. So I'm just trying to tell you the parallels from C. Okay. So all that we have to do is change this to main. This function has to be main. Okay. I will run this. So now you will see that there is hello world again printed. Okay, now I also run this command install. Right, so you will see that there is an exe that is created here in the bin folder because I had my go bin folder set as second, or the exe should be present here, right? So now if I wanted, because this is an exe, I can run it out of the box on Windows. So how will I do that? I will just go to that directory. Okay. I will go to bin. Now there are two exes. Okay. So I want to run second example. So I will just simply say second example.exe, put an enter, and I will see that this executable knows what I have told it to do. Right. So this is the very big fundamental of GoLang. This is what I wanted to showcase. Now there is just some more examples. Let me just walk you guys through that. So what you can also do is create certain packages. So what we have done is created a package. Just wanted to create a package and show how to import certain things, right? So I created a package. Let's test some numbers. I created two files here. So there is a file called, so I'll not go to this first, I'll go to this. So this file just has one function which returns a number 2. Okay, that's all it does. The return type of the function is int. So it returns an integer of the value 2. Okay. Now I want to import this somewhere, right? So where will I import this? So this is a class or a package or a file that I am just a Java person. So always this class comes out of my mind. But this is a place where I imported. So how do you import it? You basically import by talking about your module and the package that you want to import it from. Okay, so this is the module, this is the package, you import it, you basically start using this package to talk about your function. Okay, so this is, so I will just go to this place, we'll try and execute it quickly. Okay, so now you will see that what I'm doing is I am printing hello world, and then I'm printing something that is returned from another file, another package, right? So it returns 2, so it prints 2 here. Okay, now one of the more important things that I wanted to showcase was the inherent testing capabilities, right? So I wanted to test if the number that is returned from this function is 2 or not, right? So there is an inherent capability and the testing package that is already available there that you can use to write your test case. Now the test case, so this is basic syntax. You must have, I'm not sure how familiar are we with C, but C has structures. So it also had similar definitions of arrays. So if I wanted to define an array, this is how I will define an array both in C, and I will define an array. So this is how I will define an array of type struct, of which will contain elements of type int. So this is how I will do that in C, and this is exactly how I do that in Go as well. Now I'm saying I have an array, right, of cases where a variable called want. So I want this test case to run against a value 1. So this is my expected value. This function will return something to me. Okay. Whatever this function returns, just check if the value that I get function is what I want or not. That's it. Okay. So this is a variable. I get it from a function. Simply from here, I call this function. There will be a value returned stored in GOT, which is got. So this is something that I get from the function. And I will check if these values are okay or not. Okay. And then I will see if there is an error. All right. So all that I have to do, I just have to do this. Okay. Must have made some changes. So based on the changes, I will do build. And then the command that I will use will be go test. So test is a command that will be able to run all these test cases. So I will just simply say go test. It will run all the test cases. It will say if I failed or not. So there are 2 test cases in here. One test for a number, if the function is returning the right number or not. And another one just simply tests if these 2 strings are equal or not. That's it. Right, so I will also put this code on a GitHub repository where you guys can check. I've just gone fast through this code. Could have written it as well. I'm not sure if you guys are following with the code or not. I'll put it on a GitHub repository and you can look. So this is a very easy code. The examples that you will find online will be maybe much more complicated. Okay, so you can refer to this. Look at code. So this is what I wanted to showcase. And we are pretty much there on time as well. So this is basically I wanted to talk about Go. This is where I would end the presentation as well. So any questions that still remain unanswered, any questions on the code, we can talk about it. If you guys want to follow with the code, we can code again if that's okay. If you want, that is.
Cool. Thank you so much, Eva, for a
No
wonderful
problem.
talk.
No problems. Thank you so much, Eagles, for the opportunity as well.
You're always welcome. I don't see any questions and queries, suggestions. So the audience, either on the YouTube channel, if you have any questions, you can just post your question on the Discord server or the chat window. Vaibhav is here for next 5 minutes. We'll be closing in. So not a problem if you have any questions after that. Vaibhav is on the Discord server, so you can reach out directly to him or either on the Twitter as well. He'll be more than happy to answer. Okay, so you've got a question from Anu. Is generated exe file, how is the server-side hosting on GoLang?
Okay, so server-side hosting is quite easy. I did not tap on it, so I'll just show you how easy. So like Node, right, you may be more familiar with Node, so you can create a web server on Node, right? So in similar ways, you can actually create a web server on GoLang. So it's pretty simple. So I had this support. So there is an HTTP package which is available out of the box. So you can just create your own server and start hosting your pages, start hosting your services on those servers. So I can just quickly give you a demo. Let me just share my screen again. So I had this written. I thought we'll just cover basic things. guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So it's very easy. So there are HTTP package. There is an HTTP package available, and you can use that HTTP package to start your server and host services there. So it's a very simple code, right? So this is a main function where you just simply have an HTTP server available, right? And you can give this HTTP order. So what I've basically done is that it is simply, so this is one of the very simplest examples. So all that I've done is you request for this server, and this server serves you back only a string. You can serve a file, you can serve a response, a full-fledged response as well. I will do this. Okay, so what you see here is there is an HTTP server that is available. Okay. I will just share the browser window. Just a minute.
Trevor, we lost you again on the voice part.
Okay. I was just talking to myself.
Somewhat bad.
I will just share my browser again. I hope you saw how easy it was to create an HTTP server. So you can just go here. Just say localhost. So you will see that this page or this response is served from the code. Okay, we saw that. And I just take the first parameter from the URL and I will show it back. Okay, so this is how I have hosted a basic function on my website. Right? So I will say this, take this parameter, showcase it, I'm Weber. So you can definitely host a web server. This is one of the very important use cases. GoLang. Companies creating web servers for hosting, for processing, to take requests and respond to them. Right, so that is one of, because the web server and everything, the best execution possible. So you can create that component like a web server, host your site, host functions, host files, host JSONs, anything that you want on the servers. So that's pretty easy and one of the more important use cases of it.
Cool. Okay. Yes, we're done with the questions. I can't see any questions either on Discord or the chat. So, once again, we'll close this session.
Because thanks a lot, guys. Thanks everybody for attending as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right.
And
Bye.
one last,
Yeah.
and one last announcement. We are again hosting Weber for our next meetup along with Shruti and Wilbur. So you can come again at Weber on GraphQL. So we are hosting another meetup on 29th of September on GraphQL, and there will be 3 speakers, one from US time zone, one from EU time zone, and obviously Weber will be there from Indian time zone. So we'll all welcome you there. You can find the same on the meetup page for 10 September, and hope to see you there. Thank you for joining in and tuning into JSLovers. Okay, goodbye.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye bye.